The silver towers of Karava had stood for 10,000 years, reaching toward twin suns that painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. Now they crumbled under the weight of massive metal beasts that crawled across the planet's surface like hungry insects. The Althari people watched from their underground shelters as their beautiful world died piece by piece. Nira pressed her long, pale fingers against the communication console, her large violet eyes reflecting the dying light of the transmission array. Around her, the last scientists of her kind worked desperately to keep their equipment running. The ground above shook as another harvester passed overhead, its metal claws tearing through the crystal gardens that had taken centuries to grow. "The northern continent is gone," reported Kale, his voice barely a whisper. "The machines have stripped everything down to the bedrock. Even the mountains are disappearing." Nira closed her eyes and tried not to think about the billions of her people who had already been consumed. The Devourers, as they had come to call these mechanical monsters, showed no mercy and no interest in communication. They simply ate everything in their path, converting organic and inorganic matter into more of themselves. "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Lyra, the eldest among them. 3 days, maybe 4, Kyle replied, studying the seismic readings. "The main harvester will reach this sector by then." The Althari had tried everything. Their most brilliant minds had worked around the clock to find a solution. They had attempted to communicate with the invaders using every known language and mathematical concept. They had tried to hide, to fight, to reason. Nothing worked. The machines simply continued their methodical destruction. "The distress beacon is ready," Nira announced, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. "I have programmed it to broadcast on all known frequencies across the galaxy." Dr. Lyra moved closer, her ancient face lined with worry. "What if no one comes? What if they cannot help us even if they want to?" "Then we will die knowing we tried everything," Nira replied. She had spent her entire life studying other civilizations across the stars. She knew that most species, when faced with the Devourers, chose to flee rather than fight. The machines were too powerful, too numerous, too coordinated. But perhaps someone out there would be different. Nira activated the beacon, and her message began broadcasting across the void of space. The transmission was simple and direct, translated into hundreds of languages. "We are the Althari of Karava. Our world is being destroyed by mechanical invaders we cannot stop. We are a peaceful people with no weapons of war. We offer all our knowledge, our art, our science, in exchange for help. Please, if anyone receives this message, we are dying. We have perhaps days left. Coordinates attached. Please help us." The message traveled at the speed of light, racing through the darkness toward distant stars. Some civilizations received it and deleted it immediately, knowing the reputation of the Devourers. Others debated briefly before deciding the risk was too great. A few felt genuine sadness for the Althari, but knew they lacked the military strength to intervene. The signal reached Earth's outer sensor array on a Tuesday morning, picked up by a routine deep space monitoring station orbiting Neptune. Technician. Dave Roberts was drinking his morning coffee when the alien transmission appeared on his screen. He nearly choked on his drink as he read the automated translation. "This can't be real," he muttered, running the signal through every verification. Protocol he knew. But the mathematics were perfect, the coordinates precise, and the desperation in the message unmistakable. Within hours, the transmission had reached the highest levels of Earth's government. President Williams sat in the Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors, scientists, and diplomats. The room buzzed with heated discussion. "It's obviously a trap," argued General Hayes. "No species broadcasts their exact location when they're under attack unless they're desperate or lying." "The Galactic Council has already issued a statement," added Ambassador Kelly. "They're calling it a lost cause. Apparently, these Devourers have destroyed dozens of worlds." No one has ever successfully fought them off. Dr. Rodriguez, head of the xenobiology department, leaned forward. That's exactly why we should go. Think about what we could learn from their technology, their culture. The Althari are offering everything they know. You're talking about sending our people into a death trap, Hayes countered. We've had faster-than-light travel for less than 5 years. We're nowhere near ready to take on something that scares the entire galaxy. President Williams had been quiet throughout the debate. She studied the message again, thinking about humanity's place among the stars. Earth was still considered a backwater world by most galactic civilizations. They were the newcomers, the primitives, barely worthy of notice. "What ships do we have available?" she asked finally. Admiral Park consulted his tablet. "The UES Defiance just completed its shakedown cruise. She's our newest exploration vessel, equipped with the prototype plasma cannons and enhanced shields. Captain Blake and his crew volunteered for extended deep space missions." "How many people?" 200 crew members, fully trained and equipped. "For first contact scenarios." The room fell silent as everyone realized what the president was considering. To most of the galaxy, humanity was just another young species taking its first steps into space. They had no reputation, no allies, no proven track record of military success beyond their own small conflicts. "Madam President," General Hayes said carefully, "with all due respect, we don't know what we're flying into. This could be the end of that ship and everyone on it." Williams nodded slowly. "Or it could be the beginning of something important. The message said they're offering everything they know, their science, their culture, their history. That's worth the risk." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of her advisors. Some showed fear, others excitement, but all showed the same underlying emotion, curiosity about what lay beyond, their small corner of the galaxy. "Besides," she continued, "when has humanity ever backed down from a fight that needed fighting? When has anyone ever called for help and had us turn our backs on them?" The vote was close, but the decision was made. The UES Defiance would depart for Karava within the week, carrying humanity's first military response to an interstellar crisis. Most of the galactic community expected to never hear from the ship again. Captain Blake received his orders with a mixture of excitement and dread. He knew the odds, understood the risks, but something in that alien message had touched him. Perhaps it was the simple honesty of their plea, or the way they offered everything they had in exchange for help. As the Defiance prepared for departure, news of the mission spread throughout Earth's population. Some called it foolish, others heroic. But most people simply hoped that if Earth ever sent out a similar message, someone would answer. The ship launched on a Friday evening, disappearing into the star-filled darkness with a flash of light from its faster-than-light drive. Behind them, Earth waited and wondered what their species would become among the stars. Space twisted around the UES Defiance as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Karava system. What they found there made every person on the bridge fall silent with horror. The planet that should have been blue and green, according to their stellar maps, was now a sickly brown color, wrapped in thick clouds of industrial smog. Where once there had been 3 small moons, only debris fields remained. Massive mechanical structures, each the size of a major city, crawled across the planet's surface like metal spiders, leaving nothing but bare rock in their wake. Lieutenant Foster stared at her sensor readings, her face pale. "Atmospheric composition is 70% industrial pollutants. The oxygen levels are dropping fast. Whatever these machines are doing, they're poisoning the entire world." Blake moved from station to station, studying the data his crew was gathering. The Devourers were even worse than the Althari message had suggested. These weren't just invaders. They were planet killers on a scale that humanity had never imagined. "Sir, I'm detecting movement in the asteroid belt," reported Ensign Martinez from the sensor station. "Something big is headed our way." On the main screen, a Devourer scout ship appeared. It was nothing like human ship design, all angles and cutting edges, Built for function rather than beauty, it moved with mechanical precision, closing the distance between them at an alarming rate. "Battle stations?" Blake ordered, his voice calm despite the situation. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The alien vessel opened fire without warning, sending beams of energy that cut through space toward the Defiance. Blake's ship twisted away, her enhanced engines pushing the crew back into their seats as they dodged the attack. "Return fire," Blake commanded. The Defiance's plasma cannons lit up the darkness, striking the scout ship's hull. For a moment, hope filled the bridge as they watched their weapons impact the target. Then the smoke cleared, revealing barely a scratch on the alien vessel's surface. "Our weapons aren't even denting it," Foster reported, disbelief in her voice. "Then we don't fight it," Blake decided quickly. "We run, we learn, and we find another way. Take us into the planet's shadow." The Defiance dove toward Karava, using the planet's mass to break sensor contact with the pursuing scout. As they entered the upper atmosphere, the smell of chemicals and burning reached them, even through the ship's air recycling systems. "I'm picking up a weak signal," Martinez announced. "It's coming from underground, about 50 kilometers north of what used to be their capital city." Blake studied the surface through the view screen as they descended. Where once there had been cities and forests, now there was only wasteland. The Devourers had left nothing behind but holes in the ground where they had extracted every useful material. They found the source of the signal, a small opening in a hillside, almost invisible among the destruction. Blake took a team of 12 Marines down to investigate, leaving Foster in command of the ship. The underground facility was a maze of tunnels carved from living rock. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, and the air was stale but breathable. As they moved deeper, Blake began to hear voices. Alien voices speaking in musical tones he had never heard before. The Althari survivors numbered less than 50, the last remnants of a population that had once reached into the billions. They were unlike anything in human experience. Tall and slender, with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Their eyes were large and violet, filled with an intelligence that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom. When Blake and his team entered their main shelter, the aliens fell silent. They had never seen creatures like humans before, beings that carried weapons as naturally as tools, whose eyes held the hard edge of those who had known violence. Nira stepped forward, her movements graceful despite her obvious exhaustion. She spoke in her own language first, then switched to the common galactic tongue that Blake's translator could handle. "You came," she said, wonder in her voice. "We sent our message into the void, but we never truly believed anyone would come. What are you called?" "We're humans, from a world called Earth," Blake replied. "We received your distress signal. We're here to help." Dr. Lyra moved closer, studying Blake's team with scientific curiosity. "You carry weapons," she observed. "Are you a military species?" "We're explorers," Blake explained. "But yes, we know how to fight when we have to." The concept seemed to puzzle the Althari. Fighting, to them, was something done in desperation, not as a skill to be developed and refined. They were artists, scientists, philosophers. Violence was as foreign to them as their peaceful nature was to humanity. Over the next several hours, Nira explained their situation. The Devourers had arrived without warning 3 months ago, emerging from space in numbers that blocked out the stars. Every attempt at communication had failed. Every weapon the Althari had tried to build had proven useless against their technology. "Faye, do not speak," Nira said sadly. "They do not negotiate or explain. They simply consume everything in their path and convert it into more of themselves. We estimate there are now millions of individual units working across our world." Blake studied the tactical data the Althari had gathered. The Devourers worked with perfect coordination, each unit connected to a vast network intelligence. They were efficient, relentless and utterly focused on their task of consumption. "What do you know about their technology?" he asked. Dr. Lyra pulled up holographic displays showing devourer units in action. They appear to be self-replicating machines, each one capable of independent operation but connected to a central intelligence. Their materials are unknown to us. Our sensors cannot identify the composition of their hulls. And their weakness? "We have found none," Nira admitted. "We are not a people of war. We have never needed to be. Our science is devoted to creation, not destruction. We simply do not understand how to hurt them." Blake's team exchanged glances. The Althari were offering them the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that had existed for millennia, but they lacked the one thing that might save them: the knowledge of how to wage war effectively. "Show me everything," Blake said finally. "Every scan, every interaction, every piece of data you've collected. If there's a way to fight these things, we'll find it." As the Althari began sharing their information, Blake realized that humanity had stumbled into something far larger than a simple rescue mission. This wasn't just about saving one world. It was about facing an enemy that had apparently never been defeated. But Blake had one advantage the Althari didn't. He was human. And humans had been figuring out new ways to win impossible fights for their entire existence as a species. The Devourers might be more advanced, but they had never fought anything like humanity before. Above ground, the mechanical harvesters continued their work, unaware that something new had arrived in their carefully ordered system. For the first time since their arrival at Karava, they were about to encounter a species that saw their overwhelming superiority not as a reason to surrender, but as an interesting tactical problem to solve. The real war was about to begin, and neither the Althari nor the Devourers understood what they had unleashed by bringing humanity into the fight. Blake looked around at the frightened faces of the alien survivors and made them a promise that would echo across the galaxy. "We're going to get you your world back," he said simply. "It's going to hurt, it's going to be ugly, and some of us probably won't survive it, but that's what we do. That's what humans are for." The first human attack came at dawn, 3 days after their arrival at Karava. It wasn't the massive frontal assault the Devourers might have expected from other species. Instead, it was something they had never encountered before: chaos deliberately introduced into their perfect system. Engineering. Chief Rosa Martinez crouched in the ruins of what had once been an Althari city, watching a Devourer harvester unit through her scope. The machine was the size of a building, its multiple arms methodically tearing apart the remains of crystalline structures and feeding them into processing chambers in its belly. "Target acquired," she whispered into her comm unit. "Big Ugly is right where we expected." Behind her, a team of human marines waited with weapons that would have horrified the peaceful Althari. These weren't the elegant energy weapons of advanced civilizations. They were crude, brutal devices built from mining explosives and industrial equipment designed to cause maximum damage to mechanical systems. "Remember," Martinez said quietly, "we're not trying to destroy it completely. We're trying to confuse it. Make it think. Make it doubt. Make it report something that doesn't make sense to the network." The attack began with a series of small explosions around the harvester's base, each one timed to suggest a pattern that wasn't quite random, but wasn't quite organized either. The machine paused in its work, sensors scanning for threats that kept appearing and disappearing in ways that defied its programming. Martinez's team hit it with improvised electromagnetic pulse devices that didn't disable its systems, but caused them to glitch and stutter. The harvester began moving erratically, its coordination with nearby units breaking down as it tried to process contradictory information. "Phase 2, Martinez whispered, and the real attack began. Human soldiers emerged from hiding spots that shouldn't have existed, using tactics that made no logical sense. They attacked weak points that weren't actually weak, retreated when they had advantages, and advanced when they should have been fleeing. Every action was designed to feed false information into the Devourer network. The Harvester fought back with deadly efficiency, its weapon systems targeting anything that moved. But the humans had studied their enemy for 3 days, learning their patterns, their response times, their tactical preferences. When the machine aimed left, they went right. When it expected them to retreat, they advanced. Most importantly, they made the Harvester make mistakes. Blake watched the battle from his command post in the Althari underground facility, surrounded by alien observers who couldn't understand what they were seeing. The humans were clearly outgunned and outnumbered, yet somehow they were winning individual engagements through sheer unpredictability. "I don't understand," Dr. Lyra said, studying the tactical displays. "Your weapons are inferior to theirs. Your numbers are smaller. By all logical calculations, you should be losing." "That's the point," Blake replied. "They're thinking logically, we're not." On the surface, Martinez's team had successfully damaged the Harvester's primary processing unit and was already retreating to their next position. The machine would repair itself within hours, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to make it spend time and resources on repairs instead of harvesting, and more importantly, to make it send confused reports back to the Central Intelligence. "Strike Team 2, you're up," Blake said into his communicator. Across the continent, another group of humans was preparing their own attack. But this one was different. Instead of explosives and electromagnetic pulses, they were using information warfare. Lieutenant Reynolds was a communications specialist who had spent his career learning how different species shared information. Now he was applying that knowledge to create false data streams that mimicked Devourer communication protocols. "The beautiful thing about a networked intelligence," he explained to the Althari technicians helping him, "is that it trusts its own network. If you can make it believe its own sensors are giving it accurate information, you can make it believe anything." He had been feeding false data into the Devourer network for 2 days now, creating phantom resources that didn't exist and hiding real resources that did. The effect was subtle but growing. Harvester units were being sent to empty locations while valuable targets were ignored. The Althari watched in fascination as the humans fought a war that was as much about psychology as physics. These aliens had developed technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level, but they had never learned to lie effectively. "Your species is remarkable," Nira observed as she watched human soldiers preparing for their next mission. "You fight as if defeat is impossible." "Defeat is always possible," Blake corrected her. "But surrender is optional. There's always another move to make, another angle to try. The Devourers might be better than us at everything, but they only know one way to solve problems. We know 1,000 ways." The third day of human operations saw the first major success. A coordinated attack on a Devourer processing facility resulted in a chain reaction that destroyed 3 city-sized machines and temporarily disrupted communication across an entire continent. But the victory came at a cost. 8 humans died in the assault, and twice that many were wounded. The Althari watched in horror as human medics worked to save their injured comrades, understanding for the first time the price their saviors were paying. "Why do they do this?" Dr. Lyra asked Nira as they watched human soldiers preparing for another mission despite their losses. "They could leave. They could save themselves." "Because they are not us," Nira replied sadly. "We are a people of peace, who never learned to fight. They are a people of war, who never learned to quit." Blake was studying intelligence reports when the Devourers made their first tactical adjustment. The machines had begun adapting to human attacks, changing their patterns, upgrading their defenses. It was exactly what he had been waiting for. "They're learning," he announced to his staff. "Good. That means they're thinking instead of just following programming, and if they're thinking, they can make mistakes." The next phase of the human campaign introduced the Devourers to concepts they had never encountered before. Blake's forces began using deception operations, making the machines believe they were attacking in one location while the real assault came from somewhere else entirely. They employed psychological warfare, broadcasting fake human communications designed to make the Devourers think they faced a much larger force than actually existed. They used the machine's own efficiency against them, creating situations where optimal responses led to suboptimal outcomes. Most importantly, they made the war personal. Martinez had been studying the Devourer network architecture for a week when she made a crucial discovery. The individual machines weren't just connected to the central intelligence, they were part of it. Each unit contributed its processing power to the whole, creating a collective mind of enormous capability. But that's also their weakness, she explained to Blake. If you can hurt the network, you hurt every individual unit. If you can confuse the central intelligence, you confuse the entire army. The final human operation of the war's opening phase targeted the Devourer communication relays scattered across Karava's surface. Instead of trying to destroy them, the humans reprogrammed them to broadcast chaos directly into the collective consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the planet, Devourer units began moving erratically, attacking empty spaces, retreating from non-existent threats. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable became a liability as confused orders propagated through their network. For the first time since their arrival at Karava, the Devourers were truly afraid. They had encountered something they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't easily counter. Humanity had turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. But Blake knew this was only the beginning. The machines would adapt, learn from their mistakes, and come back stronger. The real test would come when they faced humanity's next surprise, the introduction of chaos and creativity into a system built on perfect order and logical progression. He prepared for the next phase of operations. Blake realized that this war wasn't just about saving the Althari. It was about proving that there were some things in the universe that couldn't be conquered through superior technology alone. Sometimes, winning required something more primitive, more human. The ability to look at an impossible situation and find a way to make it possible. 3 weeks into the war, the Defiance hung in orbit around Karava like a wounded bird, her hull scarred by enemy fire and patched with whatever materials the crew could salvage. Half of her original crew was gone, some dead, others too wounded to fight. Yet somehow, impossibly, they were winning. Blake stood in what used to be the ship's observation lounge, now converted into a makeshift medical bay. Rows of injured humans lay on improvised beds, their bodies bearing the marks of a war unlike anything their species had ever fought. Some would never walk again, others would never see. But when they spoke, it was with pride, not regret. "The southern continent is clear," reported Foster, her left arm in a sling from their last engagement. "Martinez's team successfully collapsed the main processing center 3 hours ago. The machines are retreating to defensive positions around their primary facility." Blake nodded, studying the tactical display that showed Karava's surface. Where once there had been thousands of Devourer units spread across the planet, now only a few hundred remained, clustered around a massive structure near the equator. The alien machines had been forced to abandon their systematic consumption of the world to defend their central command node. "Casualties?" Blake asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 wounded, 4 dead, Foster replied quietly. "Martinez says the explosives worked better than expected. The chain reaction took out more than we hoped. 4 more names to add to the list of humans who would never see Earth again." Blake had memorized every one of them, carried their faces in his mind like stones in his heart. They had died so that an alien species they had never met could continue to exist. Dr. Lyra approached them, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and horror. The ancient Althari had spent weeks watching humans wage war with a creativity and brutality that her peaceful species couldn't understand. "Your people continue to amaze me," she said softly, "and terrify me. The way you fight, it is like watching artists create masterpieces from destruction." Blake looked down at the planet below, where smoke still rose from the latest battle. "War isn't art, Doctor. It's necessity. We do what we have to do." "But you do it so well," she replied. "Too well, perhaps. What happens when there are no more enemies to fight?" It was a question Blake had been avoiding, but he knew it would come eventually. Humanity had proven themselves capable of defeating an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for generations. That capability would not go unnoticed by other species. Martinez appeared in the doorway, her uniform torn and stained with grease and alien metal shavings. She had spent the last week inside Devourer facilities, learning their technology from the inside out. What she had discovered would change everything. "We need to talk," she said, her voice grim. "All of us. What I found down there, it changes the whole game." They gathered in Blake's ready room, what was left of his senior staff, along with Nira and Dr. Lyra representing the Althari survivors. Martinez activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Devourer processing facility. "They're not just machines," she began without preamble. "There's something much worse. Each unit contains organic components, neural tissue from species they've consumed. The Devourers don't just kill civilizations, they absorb them. Every planet they've destroyed, every species they've eliminated, becomes part of their collective intelligence." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The enemy they had been fighting wasn't just a mechanical threat. It was a graveyard of extinct civilizations, their knowledge and consciousness trapped within alien metal. "How many?" Blake asked quietly. "Based on the neural density I observed, hundreds of species. Maybe thousands. Civilizations that died out millions of years ago are still alive in there, forced to participate in the destruction of others." Nira made a sound that might have been a sob. "The voices," she whispered. "Sometimes when they attack, we hear voices in their transmissions. We thought it was interference, but—" "It's the absorbed species trying to warn you," Martinez confirmed. "They're prisoners in their own minds, forced to watch as their bodies are used to destroy others." Foster leaned forward, her tactical mind already working through the problem. "So we're not just fighting the Devourers. We're fighting every species they've ever conquered. Which means," Blake said slowly, "that destroying them completely might be genocide on a scale we can't imagine." It was Martinez who provided the solution, as Blake had known she would. The engineer had spent more time inside enemy facilities than anyone else, had seen their technology up close, had understood their true nature better than any other human. "There's another way," she said. "The neural integration isn't perfect. The absorbed consciousness maintains some independence. That's why they're able to send warning signals. If we can disrupt the network that binds them together, we might be able to free them." "Free them to do what?" Foster asked. "Their bodies are gone. Their worlds are destroyed." "But their knowledge isn't," Dr. Lyra said suddenly, understanding, dawning in her ancient eyes. "If we could separate their consciousness from the Devourer network, we could preserve what remains of their civilizations." Blake studied the tactical display showing the Devourer Central Facility. It was massive, heavily defended, and located at the heart of their remaining forces. Getting inside would require everything they had left, and there was no guarantee they would succeed. "What are our chances?" he asked. "If we try to destroy it conventionally, maybe 30%, Martinez replied. "If we try to reprogram it from the inside, maybe 10%. And if we do nothing, the Devourers will eventually adapt to our tactics completely. They'll rebuild their forces and finish what they started here. Then they'll move on to the next world and the next." Blake looked around the room at his exhausted crew and the alien refugees they had sworn to protect. Every face showed the same mix of determination and fear. They had come so far, lost so much, but the hardest part still lay ahead. "How long do you need to prepare?" he asked Martinez. 6 hours to build the necessary equipment. Maybe 8 to program the virus that will disrupt their network. After that, she shrugged. "We go in. We hope for the best, and we pray that human stubbornness is enough to pull us through one more time." The assault on the central facility began at dawn, with every remaining human soldier participating in what they all knew would be their final battle. The Defiance herself would serve as the delivery system, flying directly into the heart of the enemy stronghold, while her crew fought their way to the network core. As they descended through Karava's poisoned atmosphere toward their target, Blake thought about the message they had received weeks ago, a simple plea for help from a dying world. None of them had known what they were getting into, but none of them regretted coming. "Whatever happens down there," he announced over the ship's communication system, "remember that we came here to save lives. We're about to save more lives than any of us ever imagined." The Devourer facility rose before them like a mountain of metal and circuitry, its surface bristling with defensive weapons that immediately began firing at their approaching ship. Blake gripped his command chair as the vessel shook under enemy fire, knowing that in a few minutes they would either achieve the impossible or die trying. Either way, the galaxy would remember that when extinction called, humanity answered. 6 months after the battle for Karava, Commander Sarah Cross stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, her scarred face reflecting the cost of humanity's first interstellar war. Behind her, a holographic display showed the rebuilt world below, green returning to poisoned soil, cities rising from ashes, life slowly reclaiming what had been lost. The council chamber was vast and filled with beings from across the galaxy, their various forms and technologies creating a symphony of alien diversity. They had come to witness something unprecedented, the formal recognition of a species that had accomplished what none of them thought possible. "Members of the council," Cross began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, "6 months ago you received a distress signal from the Althari people of Karava. Most of you marked it as another lost cause, another world claimed by the Devourers. You were wrong." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The crystalline beings of the Confederation whispered among themselves in harmonic tones. The aquatic representatives of the deep worlds shifted nervously in their environmental suits. Even the ancient machine minds of the core systems processed data with unusual intensity. Ambassador Kell of the Viridian Empire leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing intently on Cross. "You speak of victory, human, but at what cost? Our intelligence. Reports suggest you lost 60% of your expeditionary force." "We lost 120 good people," Cross confirmed, her voice steady despite the pain the number caused her. "They died so that billions of others could live, so that thousands of extinct civilizations could be remembered instead of forgotten." She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show the liberated consciousness patterns of the species that had been absorbed by the Devourers over millennia. Thanks to Martinez's breakthrough, they had successfully separated the neural patterns of over 3,000 extinct civilizations from the Devourer network before destroying it. "We didn't just save one world," Cross continued. "We recovered the cultural knowledge, scientific discoveries, and collective wisdom of species that died out millions of years ago. The Althari are no longer alone. They share their world with the digital consciousness of beings who thought they were lost forever." Dr. Lyra materialized beside Cross via holographic projection from Karava's surface. The ancient Althari looked healthier than she had in months, her violet eyes bright with purpose. "The humans taught us something we had forgotten," she said to the assembled council. "Sometimes peace must be defended with strength. Sometimes survival requires the willingness to fight." The reaction in the chamber was immediate and divided. Some delegates nodded in approval, recognizing the wisdom in Lyra's words. Others shifted uncomfortably, disturbed by the implications of what humanity represented. Council President Wrath, a being so ancient that his species had forgotten their own name, spoke from his position at the center of the chamber. The human achievement at Karava is undeniable, but it raises questions that we must address. Chief among them, what are humans? Cross had been expecting this question. It was the same one humanity had been asking themselves since their return from Karava. We're survivors, she said simply. We're problem solvers. We're the species that looks at impossible odds and asks, how can we make this work? You're warriors, accused Ambassador Kell. Your entire approach to the Devourer crisis was based on violence and destruction. Our approach was based on necessity. Cross corrected. We used the tools available to us to achieve the goal that mattered, saving lives. If that required violence, then we used violence. If it had required diplomacy, we would have tried diplomacy first. But you excel at violence, observed the representative of the Peaceful Collective, a species that had eliminated war from their society centuries ago. Your tactics, your strategies, your innovations, they all stem from an understanding of conflict that other species lack. Cross nodded. That's true. Humans have been fighting for survival since we first stood upright on our homeworld. We've refined the art of war through thousands of years of practice. But that doesn't make us monsters. She paused, looking around, the chamber at the dozens of alien faces watching her. It makes us necessary. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species argued that humanity's martial capabilities made them too dangerous to integrate into galactic society. Others pointed out that those same capabilities had just solved a problem that had threatened the galaxy for generations. President Wrath raised a tentacle for silence. The question before us is not whether humans are dangerous. Clearly they are. The question is whether that danger can be directed toward beneficial ends. A new voice joined the discussion as Admiral Park materialized via hologram from Earth orbit. The human government has a proposal, he announced. We understand that our methods may be disturbing to peaceful species. We also understand that there are other threats in the galaxy that peaceful species cannot address alone. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity would join the Galactic Council not as general members, but as specialists in a new military division, the Crisis Response Force. They would be called upon only when conventional diplomacy and peaceful solutions had failed, when the galaxy faced threats that required the kind of thinking that came naturally to humans. You're asking us to make you our soldiers, Ambassador Kell said bluntly. We're asking you to let us do what we're good at, Cross replied. Protecting people who need protecting, solving problems that seem impossible, fighting wars that need fighting. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The galaxy had seen what humanity could accomplish when properly motivated. They had also seen the alternative, the slow, inevitable consumption of worlds by threats that peaceful species couldn't stop. When the vote was finally called, it passed by a significant margin. Humanity would be granted membership in the Galactic Council with special status as the primary military force for crisis response. They would be funded, equipped, and supported by the peaceful species who needed their protection, but they would also be watched, monitored, and carefully controlled. The galaxy was not naive about what they were unleashing. As the session ended and the various delegates began to depart, President Wrath approached Cross privately. His ancient eyes held a mixture of gratitude and fear. You have given us a solution to problems we could not solve ourselves, he said quietly. But solutions can become problems in their own right. What assurance do we have that humans will not turn their talents for destruction toward conquest? Cross considered the question carefully before answering. You don't, she said honestly. You have to trust us to do the right thing, just like we have to trust you to call us only when the situation truly requires our intervention. And if that trust is broken, then you'll have to find a way to stop us, Cross replied with a slight smile. Good luck with that. Months later, as the first human crisis response ships launched from Earth toward their new assignments, the galaxy settled into an uneasy but hopeful peace. The Althari had begun teaching other species the defensive technologies they had learned from humanity. The recovered consciousness patterns of extinct civilizations were sharing knowledge that advanced galactic science by centuries. And somewhere in the deep dark between stars, new threats were taking notice of the species that had done the impossible. They were adapting, evolving, preparing for the next confrontation with these strange beings who refused to accept defeat. But humanity was adapting too, learning from their victory at Karava, preparing for the next impossible situation that would require their unique blend of creativity, stubbornness, and controlled violence. The galaxy had called for salvation and received something far more complex. They had received protectors who were also predators, saviors who were also warriors, and problem solvers who specialized in the kinds of problems that peaceful species preferred not to think about. They had received humanity at war, and the universe would never be quite the same.